Is it just me, or is Brawl Stars just a little bit imbalanced? So yeah, today we're gonna talk about some emergency balances that I really want to see as fast as possible in the game, because the meta right now, it is absolutely bananas and it needs to be fixed. So starting off, you guessed it, we have Frank. So they right now just straight up buff so that the low his HP, the faster his unload speed is, and that obviously fixed his glaring weakness. But he had a lot of good things, but the problem was the weakness was so strong that it just didn't allow him to do anything. But now that the weakness has been fixed, he is absolutely broken. And on top of that, he received a very strong hypercharge. So let's start with some basics. His HP needs to be reduced from 14,000 to 12,600, so a 10% nerf on the HP, and the damage would be reduced from 2,480 to 2,400, just a 3% reduction on his damage. So these two first nerfs would just make Frank overall just a tiny bit weaker, because let's be realistic, his amount of HP is just overwhelming. Like, that needs to be addressed, because you just simply know that when a Frank walks close to you with full HP and with his hypercharge and supercharge, you just can't do anything. It's impossible to kill him nearly unless you have a full team ready to counter it. Now talking about the rest of the abilities. So his first gadget, now you cannot use it while you are stunned or silenced. So in case you don't know, Frank's gadget, it's actually the only gadget that allows you to be used while you're stunned, and I just want that extra to be removed for consistency as well, but also because it is very strong and makes Frank pretty hard to counter. His first star power would have its duration reduced from 12 seconds to 10 seconds, and its power decrease from 50% bonus damage to 40% bonus damage. Let's be realistic, that star power is very strong. And on top of that, his second gadget, bonus damage, would be reduced from plus 100% to plus 50%. All of these three nerfs should help make Frank less unbearable to face off against, because there isn't much counterplay to Frank. Obviously you can push him, stun him, but you have the first gadget, and the nerf should help you with that. His first star power is just the obvious choice. With the HP nerf and the first star power nerf, I hope that the star power choice becomes a little bit harder, and let's just be realistic. His second gadget dealing double the damage, it was always very broken, but Frank was never really good, so there was no real reason to nerf it. Now, there is. And yes, finally, I did not forget about it. His hypercharge needs an absolute rate nerf. So now its rate will be decreased from 45% to 25%. This means that instead of 7 hits, Frank will now need 12 hits. And it might sound like a lot of hits, but remember that he also has the tank trait, so it will be very easy for him to just get his super and as well the hypercharge. And honestly, even with all of these nerfs, I generally think that he would be at least an A-tier brawler, but this is just what I think that he desperately needs right now, because he is absolutely broken. Still speaking of broken, we have Lily. And Lily, let's start with the obvious. Her first gadget, it is just way too strong. So now the first gadget will have a 1.5 second delay. So now you cannot just suddenly just disappear out of nowhere. That is no longer a choice, and I'm very happy about it, because that is just such an annoying and overwhelmingly powerful gadget. You can just disappear suddenly, and that is very strong. On top of that, I want her HP to be drastically reduced from 8,400 to 6,800. Just as a comparison, that's the same HP as Leon. And Leon actually needs to approach people with invisibility to kill them. So I think that this HP nerf is not as drastic as you think, because now Lily can actually destroy people. The HP nerf to me feels pretty justified. And a last change that I also really want, it is when you hit your super, against the wall, you still get the teleportation. So it would be a little bit like Buzz's super. If you hit the enemy, you get the effect, but also if you hit a wall. And it is just something that has been severely annoying me for a long amount of time. With these changes, I just hope that Lily becomes a lot more balanced. That HP nerf is pretty drastic, so I think Lily should become finally a balanced brawler. Next we have Meg, and Meg is also very strong right now. That doubling her projectiles obviously was a little too much, but I mean, what were you expecting? That bringing her mutation back and has a permanent feature would obviously have its consequences. So to start off, I want the projectile damage to be reduced from 340 to 300. So it's around a 12% damage reduction, which is pretty substantial. But the most important is that her charge rate will be severely decreased, because she just gets her super way too fast. One of the things that happens is that even though they did reduce her damage a little bit, I don't think that they reduced the charge rate at all, because she can actually get her super entirely with only one ammo. It's very hard to actually pull out something like that, but if you hit almost all of the projectiles, you can. So the charge rate will be decreased from 7.65% to 3.5%, which is a 46% nerf, which is just that's drastic. So now you will actually need around 2 or 3 ammo to get your super, because even though your super is not as impactful as it used to be, it is still very strong. And the last nerf, and this is just something that has been really annoying me for a very long time, when you use your super to go back to the mecha form, now instead of getting 3 ammo, you only get 50% of your ammo, so you only have 1 ammo and a half. In case you don't know, when you go back to robot form after your robot has been destroyed, you get 3 ammo. So it is incredibly rewarding her super even in the human form, because you get like technically 3 supers and a lot of damage and 8000 HP. It is just absolutely crazy, and I just want that when you get the super, you cannot just immediately rush into people, because that is very strong, honestly. So with these nerfs, I just hope that Meg becomes balanced, because she is definitely a lot funnier to play right now, but boy, she can just melt anything that appears in her way. Next on the list we have Max, and more specifically her hypercharge. In case you don't know, there are a lot of cheesy strategies with Max right now, especially because of her hypercharge, which is not the easiest to charge in my opinion, but in some really good matchups you can charge 2 in a game, which is very strong. But the main issue it is, I actually started thinking that was intended, because at first I thought it was a bug, but the bottles that you throw to your allies last triple the duration of your normal super, so 12 seconds, and they can stack. So if all of your allies just stand in the same place, you get 70% of your super back, and you can just do that over and over again, and you will just charge infinitely, which is very strong. So fixing that, the bottle's speed boost duration will be decreased from 12 seconds to 4 seconds, and the bottles can no longer stack. That is just the broken part, because I mean the hypercharge, other than that, I feel like it is pretty overall balanced. Just these 2 major issues that really need to be fixed for a Max to be well balanced. Next we have Draco, and Draco just needs some tiny nerf to his 2nd star power especially, because the healing that you get, it is very strong. You can just cycle that dragon form a lot. So the healing would be reduced from 2750 to only 2000. And the ammo that you get from using the super will be reduced from 50% of the ammo to 40%, because you can literally get your super back just by attacking, and you can just cycle it so much. It is almost impossible to kill him while he's just shredding through everyone, getting his ammo back and healing back up. It is way too strong. And finally, just the 2nd gadget having its duration reduced from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds. This gadget, it is very strong in the hands of a skilled player, and honestly I don't think that no matter how short the duration is, there will always be the incredible value that the gadget allows you to have. but this small nerf duration should make it slightly harder to choose the gadgets at least. Next on our list we have Angela, and even though he received a good amount of nerfs in the last patch notes, he is still incredibly strong in ranked especially, and when you know how to play him, he is still very strong. So to start off, I want his HP to be reduced from 6,000 to 5,400. I still have no idea how they thought a sniper with 6,000 HP would be a good idea. I am still trying to figure it out how the hell did they thought it was a good idea. Next, the super cost will be slightly increased from 3 full shots to 3.5. I still feel like you can cycle your super pretty effectively in 3v3, so this should kinda stop that a little bit from happening. And lastly, while you are charging up your bow, if that bow is already maxly charged, your movement speed will be reduced from very fast to fast. This is kinda to prevent people just keep their arrow. Like, you can literally have that arrow charge, a 4,000 damage arrow, fully charged for as long as you want. There has to be a catch. It's the only thing that would make sense in that scenario. And finally, actually, a tiny buff. His hypercharge, it's useless. The worst in the game in my opinion. You know why? Because you cannot get it, even if you already have it, because it takes millenniums, centuries to charge that thing. You will never get it in a realistic battle. So I would change the rate from a mediocre 25% to 40%. So that means that instead of needing around 12 shots, because of also the supercharge rate nerfs, you would instead need around 10.5 shots, which is just a tiny nerf, but I still think it will make Angela a lot better because I tested out, and when you pop out your hypercharge, it is really good. It is really good. But Angela is already really good even without the hypercharge. So these nerfs and the tiny buff rate to the hypercharge should make Angela a lot more balanced. Next we have Melody, and Melody, now when you use the second gadget, you use the notes around her. Kinda how Ash's gadget worked. I already suggested this once, so I'm not gonna talk as much about this one. I just feel like it would be a good idea to not make her gadget so incredibly helpful in offensive tactics. And lastly, her floating notes around her only charge half of what her attack does. So the basic attack charges a quarter of your super, and the floating nodes around you will charge 1/8 of your super, but they deal double the damage. So it'd be kinda this sort of weird compensation in a certain way, which would make cycling supers for Melody a bit harder because it's really easy to cycle her super actually, even though it is so helpful, so they should calm down a little bit. For Belle, I just want a simple nerf. The reality is, Belle has been a top 15 brawler for her entire life. There were even moments where she was the third best brawler in the game, or the 5th, or now that she received the hypercharge, there was a brief moment where she was a top 7 character. And I mean, am I the only one who started that? Because, I mean, I feel like other snipers should have their time to shine, and Belle is just occupying that space for way too long, honestly, in my opinion. So I want a 22% charge rate nerf overall. So this means that now you will need 6 full shots to get your super. Or you could instead use 2 rebounces to substitute one of those shots. And also, if you use your super, the super still gives you the same amount of super. So if you use 1 super and 1 bounce, that would be the equivalent to 2 shots. So it will not be a way to severe nerf on her cycling ability, but it will definitely be something. Next on the list we have Piper, and Piper is back into the meta because her hypercharge, boy, it is really good. But I'm not gonna actually touch the hypercharge, I'm just gonna touch her main kit overall, because she received the hypercharge, so I feel like her kit overall needs a little bit of a tiny nerf. So the recharge rate from her bombs will be decreased from 20% to 15%. So that means that instead of needing 5 bombs, you will now need more than 6 bombs. So that means that not even by fully hitting your hypercharge you can get your entire super back, which, yes, that was a possibility. Your first gadget, which is the tiny, annoying, and slow knockback thingy, no longer gives you ammo when you have the second star power activated, which is a tiny yet very annoying thing that can happen. And lastly, speaking of her second star power bonus ammo will be reduced from 0.4 to 0.35. Honestly, this star power is just crazy good. I never see people even using the first one, to be honest, so I hope that with this nerf the choice will be somewhere harder, because I mean, that's a lot of damage, but the second star power is just way too cheesy. So yeah, hopefully Piper will become balanced, because she just got a hypercharge and she's way too strong. Next on the list we have Gale, and Gale, I just want to have his 2 bugs fixed. In case you don't know, there is a bug where for some reason if you stand too close to Gale, his super will deal 2000 damage. No idea why, but yeah, that is happening. And on top of that, if you stand too close and you do not go against a wall, so if you receive the whole thing, there is a possibility of you receiving an additional 1000 damage. It is very weird how much damage super Gale is dealing, and that made Gale very unfair. And I also underestimated the power of the hypercharge, and the hypercharge mixed with this bug is making Gale way too strong. So I just feel like you need to fix these 2 bugs, and Gale will actually be balanced, because the hypercharge is actually kinda good. Next we have Barry, and I already heard that Barry is quite a strong character. But I just want one very simple nerf, which is you no longer can charge your super by healing yourself. I feel like that is a bit too cheesy. Getting your super from healing allies, it is already cheesy enough. Now you're telling me that you can also get your super by healing yourself? Nah, that's way too good. I'm sorry, Barry. I don't mean to hate you, but that is just way too strong in my opinion. So yeah, I'm not gonna nerf anything else because he just got released. But this nerf, in my opinion, just needs to happen because it's just way too much. Next on the list we have Charlie. So Charlie already received its fair share of nerfs, but I just still see her a lot on ranked and everywhere. And I already know why. Her super is just way too strong. And there is one thing that I think it should fix that. The cocoon HP will be reduced by 40%. At max level, instead of being 8400 HP, it will be 5440. The idea behind the cocoon, it is supposed to be a stun that your enemy can remove in a certain way to make it last a lot shorter. But I mean, no one wants to waste 8400 HP on an egg. No one. So in my opinion, reducing the egg HP should be more than enough for Charlie to finally be balanced. Next on the list we have a character that I am sorry, but I just hate, Rico. Oh boy, how many times I have been just sniped all over the world. His first gadget, he is just way too annoying. And now he also has a hypercharge, you have got to be kidding me. And that hypercharge is really good. So starting off, the damage of his super will be reduced by 10%. So now the super, instead of dealing 720 per projectile, not to mention that can also buff that damage with the star power, now it will deal 684, which if I'm correct, it's still more than what he did before he got that buff. His hypercharge rate will be slightly decreased from 40% to 35%. You still need less than 3 supers, but you need a little bit more than 2.5. And at the same time, the damage amplifier from the hypercharge will be reduced from 25% to 15% because he just deals way too much damage with that hypercharge. It's absolutely crazy. I severely underestimated this hypercharge. Next we have Byron, and Byron, even though he's no longer as strong, he's still very solid, and in ranked there are just so many pros that can just use him, and he can actually be really good. Like the amount of supers that he can cycle, it's actually unbelievable. So let's just tone that down a little bit. His charge rate will be reduced from 11.14% to 10%, so now that means that you need 1 extra hit to get the super, 10 ticks of poison. The super recharge rate will be slightly reduced from 24% to 20%. This, I think it does not change actually any interaction at all. and the super damage slash heal will be reduced from 3000 to 2800, so a 6.66% of nerf. I just feel like he's a bit too strong, he's really good, the damage buff helped him out a lot, and he's all of his previous buffs as well, so I just feel like he just needs this tiny nerf, and I don't think that should even impact him that much. He should still be a A/high B tier brawler. Now we have Colette. Colette is a very quick one. I know that Colette is very strong in the meta right now, but that's because there's tanks, and I mean, if there's tanks, come on, obviously there's gonna be Colette. So I just want her second gadget, healing, to be reduced from 80% to 60%. This is one of those gadgets that appeared when this brawler was useless, and other brawler is good and they refuse to nerf it, which I cannot understand. So yeah, that healing needs to be reduced, because healing like 3000 HP in a hit because you hit a tank, it is way too much. Not to mention, it lasts 5 seconds. So reducing the healing, in my opinion, feels the right thing to do. And our final nerf, it is Nita. Honestly, her hypercharge, it is just absolutely broken. It is way too easy to cycle. So number one, the hypercharge rate will be reduced from 50% to 40%. Literally every 2 supers, your super is, well, 10k HP and super fast, and that is no bueno. So reducing that to make sure that you will not cycle it as much. The bonus damage and bonus speed that you get from the actual hypercharge will be reduced from 25% to 15%. So I feel like all of these pets have this kind of problem where their hypercharge sometimes is not even about their pet, it's more about themselves, and that is a lot about Nita's case. You're just so strong with that hypercharge, it's actually unbelievable. And lastly, a tiny rework that's more kind of a nerf to the Hyper Bruce. The bonus HP will be reduced from 20% 15%, but the bonus movement speed will be increased from 15% to 20%. So kind of swapping places in a way. Honestly, I just don't like, because every single hypercharge is broken on Heist. So yeah. Hopefully with these changes, Nita will be balanced, because honestly she was fine until the hypercharge appears. So these nerfs to the hypercharge should make everything go back to normal. After a long list of nerfs, let's get the buffs kinda quickly over this whole thing. So Doug, he will now have the same trait as Barry. When I saw that Barry would have the healing trait, getting your super, I thought, Doug is definitely getting this thing, and he did not. What the hell? So yeah, give the trait to Doug, the poor guy is dying in the F tier. Next we have Squeak, and he's honestly one of my favorite characters. Look at that silly face. So he's having a lot of buffs, because I mean, who uses Squeak nowadays? With the hypercharges, everything is just way too aggressive for this poor guy. So number one, his first gadget, besides increasing the damage by 50% and the range by 100%, it will also increase the radius of the explosion by 50%. His supercharge rate will be increased from 25% to 34%, so now you only need 3 hits to get the super. And the super recharge rate, instead of being 1/8 of your super, will now be 1/6 of your super. So now a lot of more super cycle, and yes, if you hit all 6 blobs, you'll get your super back, because honestly, he totally deserves it. I hope that with these changes, Squeak becomes finally viable, not only as a character, but as a area controller character, because, I mean, if you don't use the second gadget, Squeak would be in the F tier for a long time. Now that he no longer has a gadget, he needs something, and I hope that this brings him back to the good old B tier. Next on the list we have Tara, another character that I never see and that she has been forgotten for a very long time, so honestly just a very simple reload buff from 2 seconds to 1.8 seconds. This should make a lot easier to just deal consistent damage, because honestly it takes a lot to shoot. I noticed that after playing her, and yeah, that's definitely a thing that I really think she needs to improve, because damage she does well, super cycle she does well, gadget kinda good, so the reload, it's just my only critique to her, and please buff that. Next on the list we have B. B is, well, in the B tier for a very long time, and honestly I feel like it's it's time for her to go kinda back, but I don't want to bring back she having her super in 3 hits. That was very OP. So instead, helping her recharge rate. Her super will now deal double the damage and will also recharge double the amount. Fun fact, did you know that completely hitting all of the projectiles of your super does not matter at all for your charge? Like, you will still need 4 hits regardless of you hitting that super or not. It's incredible. With this, if you hit 5 of the 7 projectiles of that super, not only you will deal a lot more damage, as you would also need 1 less shot to get the super, which would help you to kinda cycle those supers. So hopefully with this change, B will kinda rise a little bit, because I'm tired of seeing always the same snipers over and over again. Next we have Shelly, and honestly I just want her hypercharge rate to be increased from 30% to 40%. You're telling me that I need 3.33 supers for running a little bit faster and having 3 extra projectiles on my super. That's so weak. I know that Shelly is a bit stronger right now because of the whole tank meta, but that's just because of the meta, not because of the brawler itself. If it was not for Frank, Shelly would be a lot lower. So hopefully by buffing the charge rate of this hypercharge, she would kinda go back to her old state where she was good but not broken. So the rate would be increased from 30% to 40%. So from 3.33 supers to 2.5 supers to make sure that she can get that hypercharge a lot quicker. Next on the list we have El Primo. So El Primo's hypercharge rate will be increased as well from 30% to 40%. The super effect, it is absolutely awful. And on top of that, on the Brawl Talk where this hypercharge was released, they also mentioned that this hypercharge would have an increased radius, yet it never happened. So now, while hypercharge, you will also have an additional 0.66 radius in the super. It does not sound like a lot, but if I am correct, that is around 25% buff or something close to that. So trust me when I say it would be very impactful. Next we have Crow, and Crow has fallen off a lot. So to kinda compensate for that, let's increase his assassin skills and the hypercharge a little bit. So now, instead of needing 14 hits, or the charge rate being 7.12%, it will now be 9%. So that means that you only need 12 hits instead of 14, or 12 hits and 1 tick of poison, which is a lot more common. So that also means that you can cycle your hypercharge a lot quicker. And speaking of the hypercharge, while hypercharge, poison enemies cannot heal at all. So the poison would be so strong that it would completely annihilate any sort of healing. You would need to remove the hyper poison to actually be able to heal. Would it be too much? Maybe. But honestly, Crow has just sucked for quite a long time since the introduction of hypercharge. So hopefully this should bring him kinda back to the meta. Next we have Barley, and number 1, his hypercharge rate will be increased from 30% to 40%. His hypercharge is good. It's actually kinda good, but it just takes ages. Like, sometimes it's easy to cycle, sometimes it's just impossible. So with this buff you should get the hypercharge a lot more frequently, and on top of that the super recharge rate will be increased from 14.8% to 18%. So now your super actually recharges the same as your basic attack. Like, Brawl Stars has been doing this to Barley, like keeping his super the same damage as his basic attack for quite a while. So I feel like making the same recharge rate, for me, it makes absolute sense as well. Because also Barley is kinda weak, so he deserves it. Hank! Give him the goddamn tank trait. I am tired of seeing this guy suffering. He has been on the F tier since I was born. I honestly don't think Hank will ever be back to the S tier at this point, so just give him the tank trait for Christ's sake, please. Next on the list we have Ash, and Ash would now also have the tank trait. Not that it would help him that much, and because of that, his Rage, instead of you needing to lose 125% of your HP to get it fully charged by receiving damage, now you only need to lose 100% of your HP to get fully charged. It sounds a bit weird, but remember you also get rage from receiving damage. And trust me when I say that this is overall a buff, and this, even though I'm pretty sure you don't want to commit suicide get fully raged, it will still be very helpful for you just get more rage overall, and that means more speed, more damage, and all of that good stuff. Next we have Brock, and this is kind of a rework, but his hypercharge rate would be slightly reduced from 50% to 45%, so now besides getting 2 full supers you would need 1 extra attack. But now the hypercharge super deals the same damage as your regular super. It just does not make sense nerfing the damage of your super, it's just weird. But also compensate for that massive buff, now the hypercharge does not give you any bonus damage. So yeah, you get a lot of, and I mean a lot of damage in that super. So I feel like it makes sense you're not having bonus damage on your basic attack. Next on the list we have Eugene, and now the rate will be increased from 3 supers, and it's fun fact it's exactly 3 supers, to 45%. So now you would only need 2 supers and 1 extra attack. On top of that, the hypercharge super will also stun the enemies for 1.5 seconds, so that it's not absolute suicide in case you pull 3 people, like no thank you. I'm pretty sure you don't want to grab oops a Shelia Bull and a El Primo on your face. I am pretty sure that's not what you want to do. So these extra stuns should not make those interactions absolutely suicidal mission for you. Next we have Maisie, and the hypercharge rate will be very increased from 40% to 60%. So that means that you only need 1 super plus 3 hits to get your hypercharge. One of the main reasons why Maisie was even good when she was good was the hypercharge. But to not make the hypercharge absolutely broken, the bonus projectiles that get shoot out of the super will only deal 50% of the actual damage. So these bonus projectiles will not completely destroy whatever is close to you. Do not worry. Lu's hypercharge will get its rate increased from 35% to 45%. Honestly, since Lu got its super charge rate reduced, it has just been really bad for Lu. I have never seen almost ever again. So because now the hypercharge it is fairly weaker because you no longer can cycle the supers as much with the hypercharge, now you should get the hypercharge more often. And that should bring Lu to a new balance state with his new and recyclable hypercharge. Bull, we have the exact same buff. His hypercharge rate will be increased from 35% to 45%. His hypercharge is pretty bad. The only reason why his Bull is even usable is because of the hypercharge, which is not even that great of the thing. So yeah, increase that rate so then you can get more hypercharges. Seems the way to go to me. Hope you liked the changes. I know this video was very long and I appreciate you for watching it to the very end. And I'll see you on the next video.